On the night of October 24, 1944, the American submarine USS Tang was conducting the most successful patrol in the history of submarine warfare. Her commander, Richard O'Kane, had already sunk 7 ships during this 5th war patrol, bringing his total to 24 Japanese vessels destroyed, more than any other submarine captain in the United States Navy. Tang herself had become the 3rd most successful American submarine of the war, with 93,000 tons of enemy shipping to her credit. The crew was exhausted but triumphant, having executed textbook attacks night after night for 3 weeks. Now, approaching the Formosa Strait in darkness, they had one more convoy in their sights. O'Kane maneuvered Tang into attack position, selected his targets, and began firing the last torpedoes in his tubes. The first 5 ran true, finding their marks in a spectacular display of precision gunnery. The 6th torpedo, the last weapon aboard, porpoised on the surface after launch, curved sharply to the left, and came racing back toward Tang. 20 seconds later, it struck the submarine's stern, detonating with an explosion that killed everyone in the after compartments instantly and sent Tang spiraling toward the bottom of the Formosa Strait. The most successful submarine in the American fleet had just been sunk by her own weapon. The story of USS Tang is the story of American submarine warfare at its zenith, the culmination of 3 years of tactical evolution, technological improvement, and operational experience that had transformed the submarine force from a struggling service fighting with defective weapons into the most lethal commerce-destroying force in naval history. Tang was a Balao-class submarine, commissioned in October 1943, one of the modern fleet boats that could dive deep, run fast, and carry enough torpedoes to devastate entire convoys. But technology alone did not make Tang exceptional. What distinguished her was the man who commanded her and the crew he had trained to operate with precision that approached perfection. Richard Hetherington O'Kane was 33 years old when he assumed command of Tang, a veteran submarine officer who had served as executive officer aboard USS Wahoo under the legendary Dudley Morton. Wahoo's aggressive tactics and spectacular successes had made Morton famous throughout the submarine force. But O'Kane had been the brain behind many of those attacks, the calculating tactician who translated Morton's aggressive instincts into firing solutions that actually hit targets. When O'Kane received his own command, he brought Wahoo's aggression, but combined it with a precision and attention to detail that Morton had sometimes lacked. The result was a submarine captain who took every risk that combat demanded, but calculated those risks with mathematical exactness. Tang's first 4 war patrols established her reputation and O'Kane's legend. The first patrol, launched in January 1944, netted 5 ships sunk totaling 17,000 tons. The second patrol, in March and April, achieved another 5 ships for 20,000 tons. The third patrol saw 4 ships destroyed. The fourth patrol added another 5 vessels to Tang's tally. With each successive operation, O'Kane's tactics became more refined, his attacks more daring, his crew more confident. Tang was operating at a level of effectiveness that few submarines ever achieved, and the 5th patrol promised to be her crowning achievement. The 5th War Patrol began on September 27, 1944, with Tang departing Pearl Harbor bound for the waters around Formosa and the Chinese coast. These were some of the most dangerous operating areas in the Pacific: shallow waters, heavy Japanese air patrols, aggressive anti-submarine forces, and shipping lanes that were densely traveled but also intensively defended. O'Kane had requested this patrol area specifically because he knew that the targets would be plentiful and that Tang's capabilities would be tested against the best defenses Japan could provide. He wanted to prove that an aggressive submarine, properly handled, could operate successfully in waters that more cautious commanders avoided. The patrol exceeded even O'Kane's ambitious expectations. Tang's first attack came on October 10th, when she intercepted a convoy off the Chinese coast and sank a cargo ship. The second attack, 2 days later, destroyed a tanker. The third attack achieved 2 ships sunk in rapid succession. By mid-October, Tang had established herself as the dominant predator in her patrol area, a submarine that Japanese convoy escorts feared and could not stop. O'Kane's tactics combined surface running at night for speed and visibility, aggressive positioning that placed Tang between convoys and their destinations, and shooting solutions so precise that torpedoes almost never missed. The convoy that Tang encountered on the night of October 23rd represented the kind of target that submarine commanders dreamed about and rarely found. 3 large transports escorted by destroyers, traveling in formation through restricted waters. O'Kane tracked the convoy through the afternoon, waiting for darkness to mask his approach. After sunset, he surfaced Tang and maneuvered at high speed to reach an attack position ahead of the convoy's track. The resulting engagement was a masterpiece of submarine warfare, a textbook demonstration of how speed, positioning, and accurate shooting could devastate a defended formation. Tang's first salvo struck 2 transports simultaneously, their explosions lighting the night sky with flames that could be seen from miles away. The convoy scattered in confusion, destroyers racing to establish anti-submarine screens, but O'Kane was already repositioning for follow-up attacks. He swung Tang in pursuit of the fleeing transports, closing to point-blank range, firing torpedoes that could hardly miss at such distances. A third transport exploded and began to sink. A fourth was hit and stopped dead in the water, listing heavily. The destroyers, attempting to locate Tang with searchlights and sonar, were hampered by the burning vessels and the chaos of a convoy in extremis. By midnight on October 23rd, Tang had expended most of her torpedoes and achieved results that would have satisfied any commander. But O'Kane spotted one more transport attempting to escape under escort, and he had torpedoes remaining. Against the advice of some officers who urged withdrawal while Tang remained undetected, O'Kane decided to press the attack. He had come to this patrol area to sink ships, and there were ships still afloat. The decision to continue attacking rather than withdraw with an already spectacular success was characteristic of O'Kane's aggressive style. It was also the decision that would kill him and most of his crew. The final attack began just after midnight on October 24th. O'Kane positioned Tang for a surface shot against the transport and its escort, accepting the risk that destroyers might detect him in exchange for the certainty of hitting his targets. He fired 2 torpedoes that struck the transport amidships, causing massive explosions. He fired 2 more at the escort, both of which hit. Then he fired his 5th torpedo at another target that had appeared from behind the burning transport. All 5 weapons ran true. All 5 hit their intended targets. All 5 exploded as designed. O'Kane had 1 torpedo remaining, loaded in the forward tubes, and 1 more target still afloat. He ordered the final shot. What happened next occurred so quickly that the crew barely had time to react. The last torpedo left the tube normally, its propellers churning the water as it accelerated toward its target. But instead of running straight, the weapon began to curve. Torpedo men watching from Tang's bridge saw the phosphorescent wake turning in a wide arc that would bring the torpedo back toward the submarine. O'Kane ordered emergency speed and full rudder, attempting to turn Tang away from the approaching weapon. But submarines are not maneuverable at slow speeds, and Tang was still accelerating when the torpedo struck her stern. The explosion was catastrophic. The warhead detonated against Tang's pressure hull just forward of the after-torpedo room, exactly where the weapon was designed to inflict maximum damage. The blast tore open compartments, ruptured bulkheads, destroyed equipment, and killed everyone in the aftersection of the submarine, instantly. Water poured into the breached hull faster than pumps could handle. Tang's stern dropped rapidly, her bow rising toward the sky in an angle that no amount of ballast control could correct. Within seconds, it was clear that the submarine was mortally wounded and sinking fast. O'Kane, standing on the bridge when the torpedo hit, was thrown into the water by the force of the explosion. Several other officers and lookouts were similarly thrown clear as Tang went down. In the submarine's forward compartments, men who had survived the initial explosion found themselves trapped in sections that were flooding or already submerged. Some attempted to escape through torpedo tubes, a desperate measure that occasionally worked but more often ended in death. Others huddled in compartments that retained air pressure, knowing that their only hope was rescue that might never come. Tang sank in less than 90 seconds, taking 78 men with her into the depths of the Formosa Strait. The survivors on the surface, O'Kane, the executive officer, and 3 enlisted men, found themselves in water filled with debris, fuel oil, and Japanese ships that were hunting for the submarine that had attacked them. They stayed afloat using life jackets and pieces of wreckage, trying to remain invisible to the destroyers that were crisscrossing the area with searchlights. As dawn approached, they were spotted and picked up by a Japanese destroyer. Their ordeal as submariners had ended. Their ordeal as prisoners of war was about to begin. Below the surface, the drama continued. 9 men in Tang's forward torpedo room had survived the initial flooding and explosion. They were trapped in a compartment 180 feet below the surface, far beyond the depth where conventional escape was possible. But Tang's forward torpedo room was equipped with Momsen lungs, emergency breathing devices that theoretically allowed escape from submerged submarines. The procedure was dangerous and had never been attempted from such depth under combat conditions. But remaining in the torpedo room meant certain death as the air supply depleted. The 9 men decided to attempt escape. The escape procedure required flooding the torpedo room with seawater until internal and external pressure equalized, allowing the hatch to be opened. The men would then swim to the surface using the Momsen lungs to breathe, ascending slowly enough to avoid decompression sickness, but quickly enough to reach air before their breathing devices failed. The depth, 180 feet, was at the extreme limit of what the Momsen lungs could handle. The darkness, the cold water, and the psychological stress of being trapped in a sinking submarine all worked against survival. Nevertheless, the men began the escape procedure. 5 of the 9 men reached the surface alive. 4 died during the ascent, from drowning, from equipment failure, from decompression injuries, or from simply losing consciousness in the darkness and confusion of the ascent. The 5 who made it up found themselves in daylight, surrounded by Japanese vessels, too exhausted to do anything but float and wait to be captured. They were picked up and joined O'Kane and the other surface survivors in captivity. Of Tang's crew of 87 officers and men, only 9 survived. 78 died in the sinking, killed either by the initial explosion or by drowning when the submarine went down. The cause of the circular run that killed Tang has been debated but never definitively established. Torpedoes occasionally ran in circles due to steering mechanism failures, particularly if the gyroscope that controlled the weapon's rudder was damaged or improperly set. Some witnesses reported that the torpedo porpoised on the surface immediately after launch, suggesting a depth-keeping problem that might have led to rudder damage. Others speculated that battle damage from earlier attacks might have affected the torpedo tube or the weapon itself. The most likely explanation is simply mechanical failure: a broken steering cable, a jammed rudder, a gyroscope that malfunctioned at the worst possible moment. Torpedoes were complex devices with thousands of parts, any one of which could fail. The irony of Tang's fate, destroyed by her own weapon after achieving the most successful patrol in submarine history, was not lost on the survivors or on the submarine force. O'Kane, interrogated by Japanese officers, initially refused to believe that his captors were telling the truth when they informed him that a circular running torpedo had sunk his submarine. He had seen torpedoes malfunction before, but the idea that the last weapon fired on the most successful patrol would turn and kill his crew seemed too cruel to be credible. When he finally accepted the truth, the knowledge added psychological torment to his physical suffering as a prisoner of war. The Japanese treatment of Tang's survivors was harsh, but not exceptional by the standards of Pacific theater captivity. The men were interrogated, beaten to extract information, and eventually transferred to prisoner of war camps in Japan, where they endured malnutrition, disease, forced labor, and the constant threat of execution. O'Kane, as the commanding officer, received special attention from Japanese intelligence officers who wanted information about American submarine tactics and capabilities. He provided his name, rank, and serial number, but refused to cooperate with interrogation, despite beatings and threats. His resistance was noted in Japanese records and would later be cited when he received the Medal of Honor. The 9 Tang survivors endured 10 months of captivity before Japan's surrender in August 1945. All 9 men survived, though all bore physical and psychological scars from their ordeal. O'Kane, who had weighed 170 pounds when captured, weighed 88 pounds when liberated. Other survivors had similar weight loss, compounded by injuries that had gone untreated and diseases contracted in the camps. The medical evaluation conducted after liberation revealed that all 9 men were suffering from malnutrition, multiple vitamin deficiencies, parasitic infections, and various injuries. Their survival was testament to physical resilience and psychological strength that most people never need to discover in themselves. The formal recognition of Tang's achievements and O'Kane's leadership came in the form of decorations that could not adequately represent what had been accomplished or what had been lost. O'Kane received the Medal of Honor for his actions during Tang's 5th patrol, the citation noting his aggressive tactics, the destruction of 13 ships during the patrol, and his conduct as a prisoner of war. Tang received the Presidential Unit Citation, one of only 4 submarines to earn that distinction during World War II. The crew members who died received posthumous decorations, their sacrifices recognized with medals that their families would treasure, but that could not fill the absence left by death. The statistical legacy of Tang is preserved in naval records that document her achievements with bureaucratic precision. 24 ships sunk totaling 93,000 tons of Japanese merchant shipping, 5 successful war patrols, 0 ships sunk by enemy action in direct combat, 1 ship sunk by her own torpedo in circumstances that no enemy could have engineered deliberately. The numbers capture the success but not the tragedy, the accomplishment but not the loss, the legend but not the cost. The tactical lessons drawn from Tang's loss focused primarily on torpedo reliability and handling procedures. The Navy investigated whether circular runs were more common than reported, whether training could reduce their frequency, whether design changes could prevent the failures that caused them. The investigation concluded that circular runs were rare but not unknown, that improved maintenance could reduce their frequency, and that crews should be trained to recognize early signs of erratic torpedo behavior. These recommendations were implemented in training programs and operational procedures, though whether they prevented subsequent casualties is impossible to determine. The psychological impact of Tang's loss on the submarine force was significant but carefully managed. The idea that a submarine could be sunk by its own weapon was horrifying to crews who already faced enough dangers from enemy action. Morale required that the incident be presented as a rare malfunction rather than a systemic risk. Official accounts emphasized that Tang had completed 4 successful patrols before the tragedy, that O'Kane had achieved unmatched success and that the circular run was a fluke that would not likely recur. Whether submarine crews believed this reassurance is debatable, but they continued to launch torpedoes, continued to attack convoys, continued to accept the risks that submarine warfare demanded. The memorial to Tang and her crew takes multiple forms. O'Kane wrote a memoir after the war, Clear the Bridge, that documented Tang's patrols and the final attack with precision and emotion. Survivors gave interviews, wrote accounts, and spoke to Naval Academy classes about their experiences. Tang's name was given to a new submarine commissioned in 1951, ensuring that the legacy would continue. But the most enduring memorial is the submarine herself, still resting on the bottom of the Formosa Strait, where she sank in 1944. A war grave that holds 78 American sailors, whose service and sacrifice earned them a place in naval history. The recovery of Tang's wreck was attempted but never completed. The depth, 180 feet, is within reach of modern salvage techniques, but the diplomatic and practical complications of recovering a military vessel from waters that are internationally disputed made salvage operations impossible during the Cold War and difficult thereafter. The wreck remains where it sank, a steel tomb that the ocean has claimed and that nations have decided to leave undisturbed. Occasionally, fishing vessels snag their nets on the wreckage, bringing up artifacts that are turned over to authorities and sometimes returned to survivors' families. But mostly, the wreck lies silent, visited only by fish and currents, a monument to success and tragedy intertwined. Richard O'Kane returned to naval service after the war, continuing his career and eventually retiring as a rear admiral. He remained active in submarine veterans organizations, speaking about Tang and advocating for submarine service members. He never fully recovered from his captivity. The physical damage was too severe, the psychological scars too deep, but he maintained the dignity and professionalism that had characterized his command. He died in 1994, the last surviving submarine commander to have received the Medal of Honor in World War II. His legacy is preserved in the records of Tang's patrols, in the memoir he wrote, and in the memory of those who served with him. The broader context of Tang's loss is the success of American submarine warfare against Japan, a campaign that sank 5 million tons of Japanese shipping and strangled the empire's ability to wage war. Tang was exceptional, but she was not unique. Other submarines achieved remarkable success. Other commanders displayed courage and skill. Other crews endured dangers and prevailed against odds that should have been impossible. Tang's story is one of many, but it is also representative of all of them: the success, the sacrifice, the tragedy of war that kills randomly and respects neither courage nor achievement. The final irony is that Tang's most successful patrol ended with her destruction not by enemy action, but by mechanical failure. Not through combat, but through accident. Not because she failed, but because she succeeded too well and pressed her attacks one step too far. The submarine that should have returned home to heroes' welcome instead became a casualty statistic, her crew dead or captured, her achievements overshadowed by the manner of her loss. This is the nature of war, which does not distinguish between courage and caution, which kills the successful and unsuccessful alike, which respects accomplishment only until the moment when luck fails and skill proves insufficient. 24 ships sunk, 93,000 tons destroyed, 5 patrols completed, 1 circular torpedo, 78 men killed, 9 survivors. These numbers tell the story of USS Tang, the submarine that sank herself. They record achievement and tragedy, success and failure, skill and chance. They document what was accomplished and what was lost, what was gained, and what can never be recovered. and they stand as testament to the fundamental truth that war is not fair, that victory does not guarantee survival, that the submarine that fights most aggressively may be the submarine that dies from her own weapon, in waters she dominated, on a night when she had already won.